Revenge with Karen.
I knew something was rotting in the walls the moment I sat down and saw the $50 figure printed on the HR form. Like a sick little joke, they hadn't even tried to dress up. $50. Not per week, not even per month, $50 a year. After 16 years of giving them my nights, weekends, birthdays, and 2 emergency room visits. After leading the last 3 rollouts that kept their flagship product from turning into digital roadkill, number sat there like a cockroach on fine china, daring me to react. Across the table sat Rick, the new VP, who smelled like cologne and clueless ambition. Fresh from some acquisition no one asked for, Rick had rolled in 2 months ago with shiny teeth and synergy on the brain. He called this meeting a casual sit-down, like we were 2 coworkers catching up over frappuccinos instead of a man with power, casually punching a woman in the gut with a legally binding insult. When I raised one eyebrow and calmly asked, "Is this final?" He leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "Well, if you're unhappy, Lydia, there's the door." So I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a chair or cry or ask to speak to someone else. I just said, "Understood." Because when someone tells you who they are, you don't correct them. You walk out and let them choke on their own genius. Hey, quick side note before we dive deeper. 93% of folks who listen to these stories never hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying this little dumpster fire of corporate brilliance, tap that like, hit subscribe. It keeps the team caffeinated and digging up more delicious chaos. All right, back to the story. I walked out of that office with my shoulders square and my jaw locked. My fingers were twitching, not from rage, but from calculation. Rick had no idea what he'd just done. I wasn't about to spell it out for him. I took the rest of the day to clear my desk, though honestly, most of my work didn't live in drawers. It lived inside architecture diagrams, shell scripts, and the silent knots of infrastructure I'd kept running so quietly they forgot I was still holding the thread. HR did their usual dog and pony routine: sign here, initial there. They didn't even ask for my credentials or transition notes because, and I quote, "IT handles IT." I left a polite final message in our internal wiki. You may want to consult the folder marked Transition Lydia 2024. I saw the HR rep roll her eyes while I typed it. Rick strutted through the bullpen later that day, acting like he'd flushed out a rat. Told the dev team I'd been deadweight, that I couldn't adapt, and the system would be better without legacy clutter. Nobody said anything. They never do, till the lights go out. On my way out, I passed by the server display screen on the wall, quietly humming with green status checks. I had built that display. I had named those nodes, and one of them, Kismet, blinked at me just once, yellow, like it knew what was coming. They thought I was walking out defeated. They thought I was irrelevant. But they didn't know one simple truth. The woman who holds the keys doesn't need to shout on her way out. She just needs to wait. 3 hours after I left, the official goodbye Lydia email went out. You know the one, template B17 in the HR handbook. We wish her well in her future endeavors, blah blah. Like I'd been sent off on a Viking funeral instead of kicked out with a $4.17 monthly raise, and a bruise to the ego of anyone who'd ever given a damn. They didn't even remove me from Slack until the next morning. HR ran through their sacred exit checklist like they were prepping a seasonal intern for offboarding. Badge, retrieved. Laptop, wiped, at least they thought so. Email, disabled eventually. They didn't ask for infrastructure credentials, didn't schedule a single meeting with IT leadership, didn't even pretend to inquire about redundancy planning. Apparently, IT will handle it was the official policy, which is cute, considering I was IT. Not by title. Officially, I was a senior platform integration lead, but in practice, I was the duct tape holding the server closet together. I was the reason support tickets didn't outnumber customers. My final act of courtesy was a calm, 3-line email to the shared ops inbox. Hi all, as requested, I've tidied my transition folder. Suggest reviewing Lydia in for notes final docx before Monday's push. All the best. I watched the email go out, closed my laptop, left it on the desk. Still logged in, by the way. Nobody thought to log me out. Nobody thought to revoke access tokens. But don't worry, Rick told the team everything's under control. I imagine he said it with the same smug face he wore when I asked about the raise. Within 24 hours, the transition folder I'd mentioned was collecting digital dust in a forgotten SharePoint abyss. The doc I labeled critical in all caps, unopened. My handover checklist. I'd written, clear as day, root certs currently tied to Lydia K. 2 FA devices issued to me. Recommend reassigning before 9/1 ignored. The timestamp showed last modified. By me, no edits, no comments, just silence. But Rick, he was on a little power trip. Told the morning stand-up that I'd checked out long ago, said the new team would be leaner, faster, more agile. Called me a legacy hire behind closed doors. Claimed I'd resisted new systems, like I wasn't the one who built the damn DevOps pipeline, while he was still learning what the S in HTTPS stood for. I heard from Jessica in QA that he'd even made a snide joke during lunch about how dead weight floats. Classy guy. Probably thought that was clever. And the thing is, I didn't feel rage. I didn't fantasize about slashing tires or nuking the servers from orbit. That's amateur hour. What I felt instead was this slow, creeping warmth in my chest. A strange kind of satisfaction, because I knew what was coming. Not because I sabotaged a thing. No, see, I'm not sloppy, I'm not dumb, I'm professional, and that's what made it worse for them. I had warned them, months ago. There had been emails, conversations. I had flagged it during Q2 risk assessment, how centralized access was becoming a bottleneck. Had drafted plans for role-based distribution, redundancy, backups. But I'd been brushed off. We'll revisit that post-launch, the old CTO said. Rick never even looked at the slides. He was too busy playing executive musical chairs and pretending the infrastructure would maintain itself with motivational quotes and outsourced help desk monkeys. And now, the only person who knew where the licensing heartbeat lived, where the fallback scripts resided, how the encrypted backups were chained, was walking around with a library card and no forwarding email. From the outside, it looked like I'd gone quiet, like I'd accepted defeat. But under that silence was pressure, building, waiting, not because I wanted revenge, but because gravity doesn't ask for permission when it pulls something down. It started like all disasters do, quiet, harmless, just a whisper of something off. Strange login delay reported by a Canadian client late Thursday night. Then a missing invoice in the finance dashboard. A time zone glitch, maybe. An API hiccup. Nothing urgent. Just digital hiccups in a world held together by chewing gum, dependencies, and blind faith. By Friday morning, there were 15 support tickets flagged as unusual, mostly login related. A few complaints about timeout errors when accessing client analytics. Nothing was burning yet, just smoldering. Tier 1 support agents did what they were trained to do, blame Chrome extensions and suggest clearing cache. If that didn't work, they bumped it to Tier 2 with a shrug and a prayer. The DevOps chat was already filled with blame pinning. Could be that vendor update from Plaxter's webhook endpoint. Did we patch Redis this week? Maybe a DNS propagation issue? AWS burped yesterday. Rick wants a list of action items. Lol. No one said Lydia? Not yet. Meanwhile, Rick was in his element. He strutted into the morning scrum with a thermos that probably said hustle harder and asked, how's the launch weekend prep going? Someone mumbled something about login errors, and he waved it off like a mosquito at a barbecue. Let's keep momentum going. Growing pains are normal. Just loop in dev and keep me posted. Loop in dev was his go-to strategy, and pretending confidence would fix architecture. By noon, the issue had evolved from weird to persistent. Users in Europe were now complaining about license expirations showing the wrong dates. A few got booted out mid-session. One saw S-Client posted on LinkedIn about unexpected downtime tagging Fluxora Inc., with a polite but pointed anyone else having this. The product Slack channel started heating up. QA couldn't reproduce the bug on staging. Dev couldn't trace it in logs. And then, somewhere around 3:00 p.m., an intern who'd only been with the company for 10 days popped into the internal hash support ops thread. Hey, does anyone know what L control sys is? Found it in the shared drive archive under info old but no documentation. Silence. A full minute passed. Then someone replied, never seen it. Might be legacy junk. Another, we should just delete anything unused. Even owns that directory. The intern didn't respond. The file stayed where it was, untouched, unread, unloved. For anyone who knew what they were looking at, L control sys was a grenade with the pin halfway out. It was the quietly beating heart of the internal license validation loop, designed to fall back gracefully if external auth servers failed, but only if it could find the private token Lydia kept on a Naudi-activated device. Without it, system would try 3 times, then default to denied. 3 strikes, you're out. But Rick didn't know that. He was too busy barking vague motivational crap, and asking why things weren't resolving themselves yet. He held an impromptu all-hands where he literally said, "Sometimes software just needs time to catch up with itself." Meanwhile, beneath the hood, processes were colliding like drunks at a demolition derby. The deeper issue wasn't in the UI or the database, it was in the permissions core, the encrypted handshake where Lydia's credentials had once lived. And now, that handshake was cold, the chain broken. Still, from the outside, nothing had exploded, just a little friction, a little slowdown. The kind of thing executives ignore and users tolerate. But Lydia? She was silent. Not watching, not interfering, just existing out there in the world, somewhere with a front row seat to a slow-motion train wreck. He didn't need to touch a single thing. All she had to do was wait. Because the thing about systems like this, the ones no one bothers to understand until it's too late, is that when they unravel, it's never sudden. It's gradual, one thread, then another, until the whole thing collapses into itself. At 8:06 a.m. on Monday morning, the phones lit up like a Christmas tree on meth. Clients weren't just annoyed anymore, they were furious. The main portal wasn't loading. Subscription validation was failing across all tiers. Dashboards hung indefinitely. Logins returned blank white screens or looped in eternal CAPTCHA purgatory. Fluxora's $67 million B2B flagship product had become, functionally, a pixelated coffin. The first to notice was a long-term healthcare client in Massachusetts who couldn't access their analytics dashboard. Within 10 minutes, 5 more reports rolled in. At 8:23, major logistics firm in Illinois logged a critical issue. None of their regional supervisors could authenticate. And by 8:40, the entire West Coast was joining the scream chorus. The auth servers weren't just lagging, they were dead. By 9 o'clock, the war room was full. Rick stood at the front like a man trying to command a sinking cruise ship by yelling louder. "Let's all just take a breath," he said, sweat shining on his forehead like guilt in HD. "This is clearly a back-end hiccup. We need dev to isolate the failure point and reroute traffic. These things happen. These things did not just happen." The CTO, Rebecca, was nowhere to be found. Someone finally admitted she'd left for a wellness reset weekend at a phone-free yoga retreat in Sedona. No contact, no backup delegate, just essential systems hanging on a wish and a downward dog. Tier 2 support couldn't access core logs because the licensing service was down. DevOps couldn't reboot the fallback node because the permissions tree rejected their tokens. Even the emergency override shell wasn't working because, in a twist of irony thick enough to chew, it was tied to Lydia's personal root credential, which had never been reassigned. Why? Because nobody read her transition notes. The VP, still playing it cool. "This smells like a vendor issue," he announced, flipping through Slack messages like a guy checking lottery tickets for a win that was never printed. "Reach out to Plaxter support. Maybe their token refresh logic broke something." Meanwhile, legal had already shown up, quietly, uninvited. The company's largest enterprise client was on the line. Not metaphorically. Literally. Their general counsel was waiting in the lobby, phone in hand, demanding a meeting to discuss breach of contract. The contract, as it turned out, was painfully clear. Platform accessibility and data integrity guaranteed, 99.9% uptime, or full service credit and legal review. Fluxora hadn't even hit 20% uptime that morning. By noon, the product was declared non-operational. Entire client teams couldn't access their project files, team dashboards, or monthly billing cycles. Some users began posting screenshots on X, formerly Twitter, tagging the company with red-faced emojis and the kind of passive-aggressive fury that only enterprise software buyers can wield. Internally, the air was getting thinner. Someone tried calling the CTO's emergency number. It went straight to voicemail with a calm Namaste message. An engineer tried to manually override Lydia's credential chain and got locked out after 3 failed attempts, triggering a 24-hour cooldown on the fallback path. Came the cherry on top. The system that normally sent outage alerts to internal teams had quietly failed too, because it was tied to the same encrypted infrastructure module Lydia had built from scratch 5 years ago. It wasn't that the lights went out. It was that the flashlight had vanished, the batteries were gone, and no one even knew where the fuse box was. In the middle of all this, Rick paced like a man performing a TED talk to an audience of ghosts, clung to the phrase "just a glitch" like it was a flotation device, refusing to admit the iceberg had already hit. "Let's not catastrophize," he said. "We need calm minds." Blame doesn't help. What he didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that the only person who had ever understood how the licensing chain actually worked was already gone. And the very system she warned them about, the one she politely flagged as too centralized, was now eating itself in silence. The team didn't speak Lydia's name, but they were all thinking it. The emergency meeting started like a funeral where no one knew who died, just that the coffin was expensive and the air reeked of guilt. CFO Margaret Delaney walked in with her reading glasses perched on her nose and a scowl that could bend steel. Margaret didn't do drama. She did numbers, margins, risks. She ran tight forecasts and tight meetings when she was summoned to the war room at 7:15 a.m. With the words revenue stream halt flashing across her dashboard, she skipped breakfast and brought hell instead. Talk, she snapped, dropping her tablet on the table like a gavel. Rick cleared his throat, as if warming up for some corporate soliloquy. There's been some unexpected downtime, he began, voice already wobbling. We're seeing disruptions in the license validation loop that seem to be English, Margaret snapped. Are clients locked out or not? Yes, said Dev Lead Marcus, who looked like he hadn't slept since college. License server is offline. External validation can't handshake. Internal auth chain rejects tokens. Margaret blinked once. Who has access? Nobody answered. Let me rephrase, she said, her voice quieter now, more lethal. Who has access? Again, silence. Then someone, an unlucky sysadmin named Brianna, spoke up, voice barely a whisper. It was built by Lydia. She didn't document full credential transfer. We thought it was temporary. Margaret stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You thought? Rick tried to jump in, blabbering about legacy infrastructure and centralized knowledge silos and other meaningless corporate filler, but Margaret held up one hand like Moses parting the Red Sea. Is Lydia's name still in the system? A junior dev started frantically typing, screen casting up to the big wall monitor. After a moment, there it was. /core/root/cert/lcalstrum chain locked last edit. 5 months ago reset protocol. Dual token 2 FA. Device required. Unavailable, the room went dead silent. Someone exhaled so hard it sounded like a tire deflating. Margaret leaned back in her chair like a judge about to deliver sentence. No reset protocol, not without her tokens. Anna confirmed. It was built for maximum security, no overrides. Dual auth required physical presence. Rick let out a high-pitched laugh that wasn't quite human. She didn't look like someone who could do this. Margaret's head snapped toward him, so fast you could hear her earrings jangle. Do what, Rick? Build a functional infrastructure? Or cripple the company by not being treated like a human being? Rick shrunk into his chair like a melted candle. The room was quiet except for the low hum of machines, ironic, considering they were all useless now. Everyone stared at the monitor, that lonely line of text like a ghost refusing to be exorcised. Lcalstrum chain locked. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't malice. It was math. Structure. System integrity enforced by the very woman they shoved out the door with a $50 insult and no transition plan. He had tried to tell them, in writing, on calls, in meetings, but Rick hadn't read her notes. HR hadn't asked for credentials. And no one, not one person, had even thought to ask where the digital heartbeat of their $67 million product lived until the moment it flatlined. Margaret stood slowly, smoothing her blazer. Get legal, now. We need risk assessment on client refunds. Every breached contract clause, every SLA violation. Start calculating worst-case exposure. Already done, someone whispered. And find her, Margaret added, quieter now. Find Lydia Kalstrom. Rick opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to cry, but Margaret cut him off before a sound escaped. You fired the only person who understood this place, and you replaced her with your ego. Then she walked out, heels clicking like a countdown, and the rest of them sat there, staring at Lydia's name. Not just in the system, etched into its bones. By the time the legal team was looped in, the building had gone full funeral home. No more frantic typing. No more blaming vendors. No more Rick storming through the halls pretending leadership was the same thing as volume. Just quiet faces, hunched shoulders, and the collective realization that nobody was coming to fix this, because the one person who could was already gone. At 10:42 a.m., Associate Counsel Priya Garrison entered the war room with a stack of manila folders and a look that suggested someone was about to be very, very unemployed. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. She started reading. Per the enterprise-level contracts signed with Baxter Health, Novex Logistics, and try core systems, subsection 9b, system access and integrity guaranteed. Failure to maintain uninterrupted platform access for over 4 hours constitutes breach and full refund eligibility. She didn't look up, just turned the page. Breach window passed at 9:07 a.m. Someone let out a sound like a dying balloon. Rick tried to hold the line. "Okay, let's not panic," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose like that was going to erase a binding contract. Legal language always sounds scarier than it is. Just need to get the system back online and reassure our partners. It's an overreaction. Priya finally looked up. "Rick, it's not an overreaction when Tricore's VP of Ops is threatening to sue, or when Baxter Health has already issued a PR statement referencing catastrophic vendor failure. You didn't just burn a bridge, you burned compliance." Someone muttered, 12 million, like it was a prayer. 12.4, Priya corrected without blinking. All 3 clients claim full refunds, which they are entitled to as of this moment. The room felt smaller by the second. Someone in the corner actually groaned, a low, hopeless sound like they were trying not to cry in front of the interns. No one said Lydia's name, but they were all thinking it, again. Because now the hole she left wasn't abstract, it was eating their quarterly revenue alive. And the worst part, she hadn't even done anything. This wasn't revenge. This was the cost of being ignored. While legal sketched out possible damage containment strategies, spoiler, there weren't many. The devs were combing through old documentation, trying to find any breadcrumbs Lydia might have left behind. That's when Jeremy, junior sysadmin, still using a mousepad with a dragon on it, spotted something buried in a shared Notion archive no one had touched since spring. A risk assessment report dated March 2nd, titled Single Point of Failure. Licensing chain. Jeremy read it aloud. "System is too centralized under me. Needs redundancy before Q3. Recommend credential handoff or key splitting strategy with multi-sig override protocols. Risk unacceptable. Timeline urgent." The word urgent was underlined. And below that, note, "If I leave without transition, recovery will be extremely difficult. Please address by May." Jeremy looked around the room like he was expecting someone to tell him it was fake. No one did, because it wasn't. Rick coughed. Okay, that sounds serious, but maybe we can spin it. Frame it as a legacy tech issue or a temporary outage caused by third-party dependencies." Margaret cut him off via intercom. "Stop talking." The room froze, legals on with Novex. "They're requesting proof we had a backup plan in place." Which, apparently, we didn't. "Until I say otherwise, Rick, don't say anything unless it's an apology or a resignation." The line clicked off. Even the fluorescent light seemed quieter after that. The founder, Daniel Greer, was still on vacation. Somewhere in the Caribbean, probably sipping overpriced cocktails in a linen shirt. They left him a voicemail, then a text, then another voicemail. No answer. The people in that room did what people always do when systems collapse, and the guy in charge is unreachable. They waited. And while they waited, Lydia's name sat on the screen in Jeremy's open tab, her flagged report glowing like a gravestone no one bothered to read. Not out of malice, out of arrogance. And now that arrogance had a body count. The click of polished leather shoes on tile echoed like gunshots when Daniel Greer walked through the glass doors. Founder of Fluxora didn't announce his early return. He didn't call ahead. He didn't even look jet-lagged. Just walked in, suitcase still in hand, eyes scanning the atrium like he expected to find someone bleeding out on the floor. Word traveled faster than Slack. He's back. He didn't stop at his office. He walked straight into the war room. The tension shifted instantly, like someone had cracked the pressure valve on a submarine about to implode. Legal stopped talking. Ev straightened up. Priya stepped back. Rick stood. Daniel didn't even glance at him. He walked to the center of the room, dropped his suitcase by the table, and looked around slowly, measured, quiet. His shirt was still wrinkled from the flight, but his face said he'd already been briefed, or worse, observing. He took a breath. No yelling, no theatrics. Where's Lydia's transition memo? Nobody answered. The projector, still idling with Jeremy's discovery from the day before. System is too centralized under me. Needs redundancy, cast blue light over everyone's faces like some kind of digital seance. Daniel's eyes flicked to it, then to the printed outage timeline tacked on the whiteboard. "Where is it?" he repeated, softer now. Not out of confusion, out of confirmation. Rick cleared his throat. We HR handled that." There was, a folder. But Daniel turned, not fast, not dramatic. just pivoted. His eyes landed on Rick like a spotlight. "I'm sorry," Daniel said slowly, voice low and surgical. "Who signed off on her offboarding?" The room went still. Rick blinked. It was a routine who. Rick swallowed. "I did. It was my call." Daniel nodded once, like a judge about to issue sentencing. "You fired the woman who built the licensing server?" "She didn't. You removed the only person with root access to our most valuable product." Rick tried to speak. Failed. "You didn't leave us broken, Rick," Daniel said, finally looking away from him. "We were already broken. She just stopped holding us together." No one said a word, no defense, no sympathy. Even the junior staffers were still, heads bowed as if afraid the air might catch fire. "Was she angry when she left?" Daniel asked, this time directing the question to the room. Priya stepped forward. "No, not at all. She was calm. She even left notes." "She warned us," Jeremy added, his voice barely above a whisper. 6 months ago, we all ignored it." Daniel picked up a dry erase marker and tapped it against his palm as he thought. Then he turned back to Rick. "You told the team she was deadweight, didn't you?" Rick blinked. "That's look, I didn't mean, and how much has this deadweight cost us in the last 48 hours? Silence. "Legal?" Daniel asked, not turning. Priya cleared her throat. "Estimated $12.4 million in contractual refund exposure, not including long-term damage to client trust." Daniel exhaled slowly. "So, you removed the failsafe, ignored her warnings, mocked her contributions, and now you're standing in a room you set on fire, wondering why it's burning." Rick's mouth opened and closed, fish-like. Daniel looked at him with a mix of disgust and pity. "You're done." Rick looked stunned. You're firing me?" "No, I'm removing you," Daniel said. "There's a difference. You don't get the dignity of a firing. You get escorted out by security while everyone here watches. Because that's what you deserve for calling brilliance a burden." He turned back to the team. "Find her." "Already tried," Priya said. "We've got a contact at a law firm." "Good," Daniel said. "We'll go through them." Then he turned to the monitor again, staring at Lydia's name, glowing at the bottom of the last backup script. Say she was right. He didn't need to, because now everyone knew Lydia didn't sabotage anything. She didn't need to. All she did was stop holding the weight and watch the building collapse under its own arrogance. The email came through just before dawn. Timestamped 5:14 a.m. Subject line Lydia Kallstrom, external consultant offer. It came from a boutique firm in Midtown Manhattan. No bluster, no threats. Just clean language, clear terms, and a tone that read like a white-gloved slap across the face. "Miss Kallstrom is willing to consult with Fluxora Inc. to assist in the safe restoration of licensing infrastructure. She offers to walk your internal IT team through the required reboot sequence and credential reassignment. In exchange, she requires the following: full indemnity against any claims of misconduct, a consulting rate of $1,500/hour, billed in 15-minute increments, a written retraction of all prior statements made internally and externally referring to her as incompetent, deadweight, or non-essential. Upon execution of this agreement, Miss Kallstrom is prepared to begin work immediately. All communications will go through this office. No smiley face. No hope this finds you well. Just the icy efficiency of someone who knew her worth now and was charging interest on the years she was undervalued." Daniel Greer read the email once. Then again, he didn't flinch. He didn't grumble about the rate. He just leaned back in his chair, let out a slow breath, and said, "Pay her." Across the table, Rick, still somehow allowed to breathe office air despite being removed from all channels and locked out of his email, found the courage to open his mouth. "This is extortion," he hissed. "She's holding us hostage. That woman doesn't care about the company. She's milking us." Daniel didn't even look at him. Just raised a hand toward security, who stepped closer. "Do not speak about her again," he said. "You'll be gone before she arrives. And if you're smart, you'll stay gone." Rick stood there, frozen, like a dog that didn't understand it had just been disowned. The man who once chuckled about her not adapting was now being erased from the building she kept alive for over a decade. He was still sputtering about principle when security walked him out. Daniel signed the agreement less than 10 minutes later. The legal team reviewed it, trying not to smile. The payment terms hit finance at 6:23 a.m., and somewhere off-screen, unseen, Lydia sat at her kitchen table, sipping coffee while her phone buzzed quietly. Not with panic, not with pleading, with paperwork, with terms. Because this time, she wasn't the employee. She was the solution. She named her price. Her name appeared on the internal schedule at exactly 9 o'clock a.m. under a single line item: Vendor Access Kallstrom L. No one dared question it. Not legal, not Dev, not even Margaret. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the retractions, though they would later be pinned to the company Slack in a formal apology thread, one that read like a corporate confession booth. It was that Lydia hadn't said a single word in public. A LinkedIn rant. No expose, no My Truth post. She didn't need a stage. She had leverage. And in the halls of Fluxora, her silence was now louder than every alarm that had gone off that week. She hadn't burned the place down. She just walked away and then charged them to rebuild it. She returned in silence. No announcement. No grand re-entry. Just a single black sedan pulling up to the side entrance of Fluxora Inc. At exactly 10 o'clock a.m., like a ghost showing up for a final haunting. The front desk didn't recognize her at first. She looked different, cleaner, sharper, wearing confidence like a tailored suit. Her hair was up. No badge on a lanyard, no laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Just a slim leather portfolio in one hand and a neutral expression that made the intern at reception stand a little straighter. Her new badge said vendor. It was clipped to a black, retractable cord. Security escorted her up. Protocol for all external consultants now, no exceptions. She said nothing as the elevator doors closed. Didn't comment when the IT lead tried a nervous smile and said, "Thanks again for doing this." Just nodded once, like a surgeon prepping for procedure she'd already mapped out in her head. Down the hall, new hires whispered. Some had heard rumors, others only knew pieces. That the system crash had something to do with the woman they let go. One engineer whispered, "Is that her?" As Lydia passed. Another replied, "She's the reason you couldn't log in for 3 days." They reached the data room, a fortified cube behind 2 locked doors and a biometric scanner still calibrated to Lydia's retinal profile. "Override it," she said. No one argued. Once inside, Lydia scanned the room. Every monitor blinked back at her with errors. Red warnings, timed-out credentials, failing demons trying to restart without direction. She moved like someone who knew where every bone was buried. Sat down at the console, inserted a flash drive, logged in. One password, one scan, one click. And then the hum changed. It was subtle, but everyone in IT knew it, the soft drop in fan pitch, the click of systems breathing again. On the central display, heartbeat of Fluxora's licensing server turned green. One by one, validation nodes came back online. Tokens synced. User sessions re-authenticated. Dashboards cleared. Uptime restored. Clients live. Disaster reversed. The room filled with nothing but the low rumble of air ducts and blinking lights as Lydia removed the flash drive, wiped her user session, and zipped the leather portfolio shut. She didn't linger. On her way out, Daniel was waiting in the corridor, not flanked by legal, not flanked by marketing or PR, just standing there, tired, hands in his pockets, like a man who knew the price of arrogance and had just paid it in full. Lydia stopped in front of him and handed him a small, matte black hard drive. "This has the updated documentation. Redundancy plan, role-based access template, everything they wouldn't let me implement." He took it, silent. She met his eyes for the first time since the day she walked out. Calm, detached, not angry, just finished. "Next time," she said, "promote from within." Then she walked past him, down the hallway, past the interns who stopped whispering when she turned the corner, past the frosted glass conference rooms where DevOps leads now carried notebooks filled with apologies. And as the elevator doors closed behind her, Daniel looked down at the hard drive in his hand, paused, then turned to Margaret and whispered the line that would be repeated in every meeting, every team huddle, every Slack thread for months to come. "God help us. Who did you just fire?" Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.